All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. It is 7 p.m., and I call the August 26, 2024 School Board meeting to order. The Holmen Board of Education and the School District of Holmen acknowledge that our schools are located on the ancestral homelands of the Ho-Chunk, Sauk and Fox, and Dakota peoples. We celebrate and honor these lands and their sacred significance to Indigenous peoples. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Board Clerk Maggie Smith, would you please call the roll?
Jennifer Deek.
Here.
Khadijah Islam.
Here.
Chris Lau.
Here.
Lindsay Need.
Here.
Maggie Smith here. Bridget Todd Robbins.
Here.
Barb Wunsch.
Here.
Kevin Zilke.
Here.
All right, with 7 of the 7 board members present, I declare a quorum. I note that the agenda has been posted, distributed, and sent to the local media. With this in mind, are there any changes to this agenda? I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as published.
So moved.
Chris has moved.
Second.
Maggie has second to approve the agenda as published. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the agenda as published, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion to approve the published agenda has passed. And we do not have any public participation this evening. So we are moving on to the district administrator's report. Dr. Mueller.
Yeah, I just wanted to take time this evening to first thank all of our staff for preparing for the return of our students today. Last week, they spent a lot of time, especially with all the construction going on in our school district, and put in a lot of extra hours. Our teaching staff, our maintenance, our buildings and grounds, our building leaders, just really everybody. I think of our nutrition team, all of them, and drivers. They were all out practicing, getting ready, preparing, and I just can't thank them enough for all they did to make sure that we could have our students come and arrive on August 26th. And also, I just wanted to mention, this is the first time we've ever started school in August, and it is still summer as we could feel today, and we apologize for those that had to, we have the excessive heat warning, and the majority of our school district was very cool in that, but there are going to be places where it is warmer, and we will keep working and adjusting with that, but I think tomorrow there'll be some warmth again, so we'll just want to make sure, it's fine, they can wear their tank tops and shorts and so on, and we just want our students to be comfortable, and we'll do our best. So that's all I wanted to say. So welcome back, students.
All right, thank you. Moving on to reports and discussion. Item 8.1. Dr. Mueller, Executive Director of Finance and Operations Julie Holmen, Executive Director of Instructional Services Kim Edwards, Director of Human Resources Melissa Cates, and Executive Director of Student Services Jill Mason will present updates to the district dashboard for approval on the September 9th consent agenda.
That's a mouthful.
I'll start her up. Well, welcome, school board. Good evening. So as we start to kick off our 24-25 school year, just wanted to go share with you some of our what we're working towards this school year. So just as a refresher, on July 27th of 2020, this seems like a while ago now, the school board adopted the strategic plan you see before you. The plan had involvement from our staff, students, and community members in developing this. You can see the vision at the top, on the top right there, belong, serve, succeed. That defines our organization's aspirations for success and what we are set out to achieve. Then our mission, down in the bottom left corner there, preparing students for tomorrow through an engaging and inclusive educational community today. That is the purpose of our organization and what we strive to do each and every day. And then our core values, you can see them listed up there in the top left, are the key beliefs and standards about who we are and what we stand for as an organization, which really drives all of our daily actions. So this strategic plan, as you'll notice when we bring reports before you and when we are doing things, making decisions, this is what we use that really helps guide us as a district and really shows who we are. One example of this is when we have our funding needs. We take a look at this and we use this for criteria to decide, okay, with the funds we have and what we want to do, what are our priorities. So it helps us in prioritizing that. Then you can see on the right side, we have our 5 focus areas: student learning, fiscal, workforce, community engagement, and health and safety. This really ensures that we have a healthy, well-balanced organization, and it is what we identified as what is important to us in what we use to, we develop measures within each of these focus areas to monitor and really ensure that we are doing our best to perform with excellence. So annually, in October, we have an annual report. And so tonight, what we're doing, just to be clear, tonight we're kind of saying this upcoming school year, these are what our goals are and what we're really trying to work towards. And then in October, we actually report on the outcomes from last year. And that happens at our annual meeting to the community, because we want to make sure that we're reporting out what's happening, what's our status in the district and how are we doing. So tonight we're going to share, we have with us our team that is really responsible in leading these areas and report to you what we're looking forward to this upcoming school year. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim Edwards.
Okay, so we all work together to achieve these goals, but the one that most closely aligns to instructional services would be student learning. Again, working on succeeding and reaching those rigorous learning standards with our integrated and comprehensive service delivery model. Our first goal is around graduation rate. This is looking at our 4-year graduation cohort with setting goals at 97%. This is always a lagging indicator. So the last time we had publicly released data, we were inching closer to that, but we had not quite reached 97% yet. So we're going to keep that goal as it is. The next 3 data sets actually are working with embargoed state assessment data. So while we have some internal results, I'll be coming back with our comparables and the state like later October, early November, depending on when the state publicly releases those. But the good news is that our internal data that we're working with right now shows that it was safe for us to pretty significantly raise those goals with ELA and math when we're looking at 3rd through 8th graders. We had set the goal previously for the last couple of years at 55% of our students reaching proficient and advanced. We're bumping that up to 68% now. So I'll be coming with a full report of that when that's publicly released and can tell you more in detail what that looks like, as well as with the state and the comparables. ACT will be released right about that time as well, but right now it's looking like we're going to keep that with working towards that, reaching that composite score of 21, and that would be the assessment that our 11th graders take. Any questions on student learning? Okay, thanks.
Good evening. We continue to have 6 fiscal measures on the dashboard. In addition to those, we also have internal measures within our support services programming. So these 6 are the same as they were for 2024. Expenditure per student performance, that is the measure that looks at comparative expenditure per pupil. And at the same time, looking at the student assessment data results to make sure that that the spending that we are doing is comparative and we're getting a good result based on the funds that we are spending per student. That goal will remain at plus or minus 5% of the state average. The next one is the maintenance and operations cost per square foot. So this is our operational funds 10 and 27 expenses for maintenance and operations. We continue to be lower than our peers. Our goal is plus or minus 10% of peer average. The reason that goes up to 10% is in any given year, our peers or Holmen could be spending more money on specific like one-time projects within our operational funds, like Fund 10. So if we have a big Fund 10 operational expense, that may cause us to spike, and then we're always looking to be within that plus or minus 10% of our peer average. The transportation cost per pupil mile, looking to maintain less than our peer average. With this one, we're looking at both contracted and in-house services provided for transportation. We continue to trend lower than our peer average with our in-house services. and therefore not looking to change that at any certain time. Often we get asked things like, should we contract out instead of having our own transportation services? And history demonstrates that our trend continues to be lower than peer average for these costs when we do it in-house. The fund balance has a total percentage of expenditures, and the last one is a similar measure for school nutrition. So one for the general operational fund and one for school nutrition. Goals are slightly different. For general fund, the board at several years ago now, so I'm not sure if any of you were members of the board at the time that this target was set, but it was set at 26.31% with a variance of plus or minus 10%. With ESSER funding helping to offset the last several years, we have exceeded that upper threshold and have started to come back down with some deficit spending in the forecast. The special program support of operational expenditures, this is our transfer to special education that occurs every year to help support the expenses within special education. We do tend to be over 100% of our peers on this measure in Holmen. Historically, that has been the case as well. Although the variance may stay somewhat consistent, we continue to trend above. And so looking at how do we continue to provide the services for students with special needs while also trying to be more effective with the dollars we're spending to serve the students. Again, that is remaining at a less than 120% of the peer average as our goal. And then lastly, that nutrition services as a percentage of expenditures, plus or minus the goal to meet at least 3 months of average expenditures. And that is actually a recommendation from the State Department. If you have a lot more than that, then they require that we have a plan in place on how we're going to spend it down and stay within that 3 months worth of expenditures, which is where we sit right now with a plan and a plan to reduce some of that. But that goal is going to remain the same as well for 2025. Any questions on fiscal?
Could you just say one more time with the for the fund balance, variance above the goal is 10% or plus 2.63%?
Right. So,
I didn't-
so if we're at 30 right now, we're above the top range. So when you look at that chart on the dashboard, you look at that individual chart, you would see like the red arrows up and down, and we're trying to sit between them. Right now, we are above the top arrow,
Okay,
exceeding like too much, right?
sure.
Trying to spend that down responsibly. That goal was set several years ago, and at the time we kept trending upward, and then we sustained it with ESSER pandemic support, and now it's will start to come down with the forecast. So, does that make sense?
All right, for workforce, we have two key measures that we'll be focusing on. In addition to these, we don't have, I think Jill will talk about it a little bit on hers, but the diversity, equity, and inclusion. There'll be some pieces incorporated for workforce as well from that. But for staff engagement, looking at greater than or equal to 90% of our staff indicating engagement in their work based on the survey responses. So every year we do the staff, student, and parent surveys on the district, and so that's where these measures are taken from, is based on all staff responses. There's a specific, I believe, 5 or 6 questions that we look at based on staff engagement and use the responses from those questions each year for continuous trend information. And then retention rate, looking at our educators specifically, a 90% or greater retention rate of our educators, and that is based on a 5-year average. So that number also does not include retirements. We only include those who are leaving the district for purposes other than retirement as we look at our retention rates.
Looks like our engagement goal went lower.
Changed.
Yeah,
Yep. So
changed
we
a
used to
little
be
bit.
at 5% for engagement, and we have consistently been around 92-93%. So this year we made the change to move that down rather than having a very high unachievable goal. Let's look at maintaining what we have and continuing at our current trend. So
Has there ever been discussion about adding a retention rate for other staff?
we do monitor that within the department for all staff, but we do not put that on the dashboard as a key measure. And I believe that's included in the annual report as well, the all staff, and then we break it down by classification.
How do you determine what is a key measure versus what's annual report?
There's a lot more internally that we're measuring that's on the annual report and outside of the annual report as well. Like I think on the operations side with Julie, there's lots of measures within those departments that they're looking at that we don't put on the annual report or use as a key measure.
So, yeah. So for example, like I think of staff engagement, one of our goals with survey data is our goal is 90% or higher. And in some of these areas, we've been achieving 90% or higher for multiple years. So sometimes we have a discussion then amongst ourselves, okay, is that something that should stay on the main dashboard, or is that a measure that goes and we monitor and continue to monitor? So the dashboard are more of the high level things that we want to continue to focus on this upcoming year. So for example, because we, as an organization our size, we can't do everything all at once. We have to pick a few key things and really focus on those to build that excellence. So that's what this dashboard is showing. It doesn't mean that we still don't monitor and measure it within our district. So when we do our annual report for the public, you'll see more data than just this on there in more detail and trends and years. But then also beyond that, within our departments and at the building level, they are having scorecards and doing other monitoring of data that, and the purpose is for all that work to align up into the dashboard work for improvement within the organization, if that helps a little bit. So there's multiple questions on the staff engagement. And so some of the questions were, it's an average of these multiple questions. So some of the questions were very high and some were a little bit lower. So it's like, let's see if we can try and get them all greater or equal to 90%. And then that average would be above that also, is more or less what that.
And some of those, like for example, on the staff survey, if we see an area that is extremely low, we may dig down and is it a specific building? Is it a specific classification of employees? So this just gives us that high level, and then we just dig down deeper as we review that data from the survey.
So to clarify, there are multiple different indicators that you're measuring in the survey that range around that 90%. The goal is to get all of them to be at that 90% or higher?
Yep, so we take all of those questions and average, put all of the responses, and I believe it's an average of the 90% if you take all 5 or 6 questions.
Okay. Got it.
But if there's an area that's much lower, that's where we're gonna spend some time and learn more.
Remind me, are there ever spots on those surveys for free text?
Yeah, and those are areas too that as we review those comments, like what's a common theme that we're seeing and how do we have those conversations at the different buildings or with the different supervisors.
All right, community engagement. So the first key measure there, open enrollment. This is one that's been on there since I've been here, because that was quite a pain point when I arrived. And really what this is what net transfer means is the amount of students that are open enrolling in versus the amount of students open enrolling out, that we want to close that gap. And we want to really see that get to a point where it would be nice to have more students coming in than going out, is what our ultimate goal is. And so we've been closing that goal over the years, but I want to say I don't want to steal the thunder for the annual meeting, but we're doing really well right now, but we want to continue to keep improving on that. Really, it's kind of like saying we want to be a district of choice in the end. The student engagement one, here you'll see we actually picked a specific question because the question, I feel like I belong at school, aligns directly with all of our work and our vision. And so we want to increase that by 5% on the survey question. It's been improving and improving in pockets, but we want to get that 5% improvement over time or from year to year. And then parent engagement, shooting for 90% or higher on the survey question, does your family feel like they belong at school? So in this case, for our engagement, really focusing on our vision of belonging. So, all right.
All right, health and safety. So the first part is the workers' compensation experience modifier, and we want to keep this one because this tells us how safe our staff are within their work setting or their school setting. So for instance, there was a couple of years ago, I think, we had our insurance rep come and talk about, making sure when you're walking outside, you're wearing your boots, and making sure that when you're up on ladders, you're doing that safely. And when you're demonstrating something in PE, you're demonstrating it safely, not, going full at it like all of the kids, so that we're not hurting ourselves. So we just want to make sure that those are some physical and emotional safety pieces there too, but more so physical. The student safety survey, this one we're going to keep for this year. We measure the student response, my school is safe. What we've seen, it hovers around 90. Right now, I think we're at like 88 or 87%. I'm not sure if students are understanding that question, or I don't know how they're interpreting it, because safe could mean physically safe, it could be emotionally safe, it could be a lot of different things. So we're going to be looking at that question and see if that might be something in the future we change. Staff work-life balance, we're still going to keep this one. We pretty much trend upper 70s. I think like 78%. So we'd really like to keep this one and continue to work with our staff on how to continue or how to sustain a healthy work-life balance. And then social emotional learning, we do have our new SEL screener, Panorama. We did a pilot last spring, and so we now have some data, and emotional regulation is a really, really key component of SEL, and it's one you'll hear me talk about in just a minute when I go over the seclusion and restraint data. So we are going to be focusing on emotional regulation in our schools, as we already have been, but making more intentional learning pieces for that. So, any questions?
Oh, actually, sorry, I do have a question.
Want me to go back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have a metric at this point for social and emotional? Okay.
Yep, Panorama is our new SEL screener that we've just implemented. So,
Okay.
yeah, we do actually. So
So this will be the first time that we're implementing it. So we don't have like a baseline of
we
what
do
it
have a
had.
baseline, and it's a combination of a couple scores, kind of like Melissa talked about. I think we were probably 60s, 70s
Okay.
in the couple scores. So we really wanted to start at that 80%.
So then from here on out, we'll have the panorama data. to be
Correct.
able to-
Yep, we'll be able to start to establish, like you said, a little bit more of a baseline. We don't have 3 data points, which usually gives you that baseline. But
Sure.
we wanted to start somewhere, so that's where we're
No,
starting.
that's awesome. I'm glad to hear it.
I have one other follow-up, but it
Yes.
backtracks to student learning, sorry. It's just been pinging around my brain. So when it says achieve proficiency, that's proficient or advanced.
Correct.
Have we ever thought about phrasing it that way instead of saying achieve proficiency? And only because I think, like maybe if you're not in education and you see that as a headline, 68% of students are proficient is how you read that.
Could add both, yeah.
And it's missing that,
Proficient and
that
advanced,
some
yeah.
of them are advanced, that it isn't just like the midline.
That's a good
Does
point.
that make sense? Just a thought.
So just wanted to bring this before you as a board because this is what we would focus on this upcoming year. So thank you for your input, Maggie, on the verbiage there. And if there's anything else you see as you're reviewing it a little further in that, just send an email or give me a call on that, or you can share. But really, these are our five areas we've been focusing on, and it's really excelled our district in many ways. So we do adjust it each year to what we need to, and we'll continue to do that. So, any other questions?
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to items 8.2 and 8.3. Jill Mason will present the seclusion, restraint, and bullying report, as well as the contract for hearing interpreter services. Both of these items will appear on the September 9th consent agenda.
All right, so first we'll start with seclusion, restraint, and bullying data. I'll start with bullying because there's a little bit more I want to talk about with seclusion and restraint. I'm not going to read the numbers to you. You can look at the numbers. Just a reminder that the bullying numbers are the only incidents that were reported and investigated by an administrator and deemed to be bullying. So there are several reports, and we originally had talked about a couple years ago using those, but that's really hard because it could be a very minor thing to a major thing. And so documenting the actual incidents that were reported and found to be bullying, that's what we are looking at. With the bullying, some of these are considered also harassment from the protected class. And so Jennifer Gimmer, who's been working with the DEI committee, they formed a hate and bias committee or a team over at the high school. As you can see, the high school has got some more numbers. And so that's what they'll be working on, is not just for students in protected classes, but also if it's a bullying issue, they can go through that hate and bias group to really talk through that situation. Any questions on the bullying numbers?
No questions.
So seclusion and restraint, again, restraint is when a student is having some challenges and we have to physically hold a student based on our CPI training. And as you can see, Evergreen, Viking, Sand Lake, and Prairie View have the highest numbers. In the past couple of years, we've had several students with very challenging behaviors. And I think we've talked before, I think I've come here before to talk to you about our partnership with Cooley Connections, and then really continuing to work on de-escalation strategies. So that is what we will continue doing. Evergreen has, for the past couple of years, significantly higher numbers. And so we, again, have had a partnership with Cooley Connections. We started the Impact Classroom last year, and that was very successful. We've transitioned some kiddos out, and just talked to Sarah today. They had a really good first day, so that's fantastic. We still do have a couple of kiddos who need a more self-contained setting. But within that, we're also, that is a school that got flagged for too many seclusion and restraints. And so we'll be working on an action plan, kind of digging into the data, finding out what's going on. We kind of already know. And so we're working on other options for our students, other options for our staff. But again, when we have students with challenging behaviors, we also have to protect our staff. And so finding ways to do that, sometimes seclusion is a better option because that's having a student in a private room or a smaller room to help de-escalate the situation. And that way the student does not have to be restrained physically. Sometimes students really struggle in a room by themselves. And granted, they're not by themselves. Our staff is right outside the door, sometimes even inside the door. Sometimes students really need that bear hug or that deep pressure, so restraint does work better if they're in a very, very escalated state. So we're really trying to just analyze our data and figure out how we can reduce those numbers of seclusion and restraint. I know that in a couple of our other schools, we have students with very significant autism. And so that presents some more challenges because sometimes the students aren't able to communicate their needs and wants, and it's a struggle for us. And so they're escalating, and we're trying to figure out how to help them. So sometimes restraint makes it worse, sometimes seclusion makes it worse. So we're really working on how do we best meet the needs of our students without necessarily having to go those routes. One of our next steps, Sue Osovich is our autism and ID program support. We did send her to, I'm gonna say it wrong, Ukiro training. Cholita uses that, and that's where they have blocking pads. And so instead of having to use a restraint, you hold up blocking pads. And so the student, today, I was actually at one of the schools that we could have really benefited from that. We're ordering them right now. They're not quite in, but our staff is going through some of that training again. That wouldn't be considered a restraint or a seclusion. It's just a blocking pad that our staff would use to help the situation. So, other questions about that? That was really fast.
When you say Evergreen was flagged for seclusion and restraint, is that internally or is that like DPI or outside?
Through
of here?
DPI. So we have to report these, we have to report this to DPI. And so they sent, I think it was early this summer, Sarah, or I think they sent, did they send both? They sent both of us an email. I've never had one in my career. So this was the first time, but they just flagged as, and it's just, they're checking on us just to figure out what is going on in your schools and how can we help you if there's something different that we need to do. And again, we don't use seclusion and restraint unless we absolutely feel that that is necessary for the student or the staff member, so.
Is it based on, is there like a threshold that you crossed, or is it based on like a rapid increase in the numbers that you're reporting, or?
I don't know. It didn't really say. It just said we need to come up with a root cause and then have an action plan. So Sarah and I have a date on the calendar to kind of work through that and figure out next steps.
That's kind of along the lines of my questions, because with DHS and with family care, providers are really not supposed to do that without applying for a restrictive measure from DHS. So is DPI kind of the same? Do you have to apply to say, like, here's why we need it, and here's the things we were trying?
We don't have
resorting to
yeah, we don't have to apply, but we do have to show that we've trained our staff. So we use Crisis Prevention and Intervention, Crisis Prevention Institute, CPI, we use them. We have a trainer, again, Sue Osovich is our trainer, so she's able to train our staff and work with our staff to be trained. So we wouldn't be able to do any seclusion or restraint unless we had staff that are trained. They are not able to do any of that unless they're a trained staff member.
But
So-
before you're even getting to that point, the whole team is following a behavior support plan and things that
Yes.
you can try to de-escalate it before you would
Yes.
ever get to that. So we've tried this and this and this that are in this
Absolutely.
individual's plan,
Absolutely.
and now we're here. Okay.
And usually it's because there is a safety issue. So the student has escalated to the point of making it unsafe for that student or other students and staff around them. So, and sometimes it's students with behaviors and sometimes it's students with autism who have behaviors that are not, the student is not even able to understand what they're doing. So that makes it kind of tricky, at least when you have a student with behavior, you can kind of talk through some more ideas. Sometimes with autism, it's really, really hard to figure that out. We're trying lots of different sensory, our OTs are involved greatly to figure out some different sensory tools for our kids. We have started, again, working with Cooley, so we have started working on some different strategies and framework. And then we also are starting a smaller setting that's kind of a bridge before Cholita at Prairie View Elementary to really have more of that intentional work. And that's where we're doing that Ukiro training with the pads, having some different construction in there so that it makes it safer for the staff and students, so we don't necessarily have to restrain if it's just a couple of students versus more. So just making those types of decisions, but everything costs money. Julie's been really great to work with. All this stuff costs money, but when you look at an out-of-district cost, like going to Cholita, it's very, very expensive. So we're really trying, how can we do this here in the district so we don't have to send our students out?
Thanks.
I was curious, like with the numbers at the elementary schools and then going to middle and high school where it's almost nothing with seclusion and restraint. Is that because we have more need in the elementary schools that's going to head to middle and high school? Or is that because of like a behavioral developmental change or a different setting?
It could be all of those things. I think in the last couple of years, what we've noticed is we've seen these types of numbers much younger. So we're seeing, last year we had several students in our 4-year-old kindergarten program, which usually you'll see 0 under HPP. You can see that there's several numbers under that this year. So we're seeing younger kids having a lot of emotional regulation difficulties. And so hopefully by the time they go to middle school, we have provided enough framework, strategy, intervention so that they are less and less as you go.
Do you recall what the numbers were from 22, 23 for Evergreen?
I don't recall. I can get you those. I know Evergreen was high, Sand Lake was high. I would say Viking was higher last year than they probably have been.
Because the DPI thing was from 2 years ago, right? And
Years.
then this is
Yep.
this year's data, so.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like that much of an outlier for this year's data, but.
Yeah, that is also interesting, why they chose one and not more than one. But we'll work it through and see what happens.
Yeah, thank you for your work on this. I know this is probably one of the hardest issues for public education is balancing the needs of students who have some dysregulation and the overall safety of our students and staff.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I think I can speak for anyone in this district, no one wants to seclude or restrain a child. No one went into education wanting to do this or feeling that they ever would need to do this. Yeah. We're at a point now where other students are getting hurt and our staff are actually getting hurt, which is again why we have to keep the workers' comp index on there too, because when our staff is injured from a seclusion or restraint or another student, they do go to the clinic and sometimes have a workman's comp report. So we don't want that. We don't want that for our kids. We don't want that for our staff. So, any other questions on that one?
I think we're good on that topic. We can move on.
Okay. Ooh. Hearing impairment. So typically we like to hire our hearing interpreters internally. We currently have one we're working with. We tried to find one for this position and we were unable to secure an individual for this position. I think we might be able to repost in the spring and hopefully have another couple applicants or have that individual return with more training. So in the interim, we are asking for a contracted service to have that interpreter here with our student who needs that for communication. Questions on that one?
No questions. Right. Thanks, Jill. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. For the consent agenda, the board has been furnished with background materials on each item or has discussed it at a previous meeting. These will be acted upon with one vote without discussion. Would any board member like to pull an item out of the consent agenda to be discussed and or voted on separately? I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as provided.
So moved.
Motion by Chris,
Second.
second by Khadijah. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Right, moving on to the board debrief. I will call upon board members and ask you to present any comments or committee reports you have. And tonight, we'll start with Khadijah.
Just want to welcome everyone to their new school year, in particular, new staff and educators that are coming into our district. Welcome. And I always think it's exciting that first day of school when you're in that transition. So all of our fifth graders that are now sixth graders, all of our eighth graders that are now freshmen. Hopefully everyone is finding their footing and getting to where they need to be and staying cool. It sounds like we're doing our best as a district and as a people in this city to stay cool. So, yeah, just wishing everyone the best with that, and excited to have the ribbons cutting ceremonies for the 2 playgrounds this week.
Okay, Chris?
No, I don't have anything. Just welcome back to the 24-25 school year.
All right, Lindsay?
Yeah, third, what everybody said. Welcome back, everybody. It sounds like the kickoff was really awesome. It's unfortunate I couldn't attend one last family vacation here, but that sounds like such a great time. And those pictures are awesome as usual with the clouds of smoke coming in and things like that. So, and we had the privilege of touring a lot of the buildings, and I know there's, people are saying, when's construction going to be done? It's kind of, there's parts that are done and there's parts that are going to be ongoing. And, but I know that in the end, it's going to look really awesome. And I've heard a lot of really good things too, that just even how a paint color just makes it so different and nice, and all those little upgrades that everything's getting. So thanks to everybody that's putting in all the hard work to get everything completed and kind of pivoting and adjusting around the construction as we finish up. So thank you, everybody.
All right, Maggie?
I will echo all that has been mentioned so far, and also just reiterate, extra gratitude to everyone who's been flexible with all the construction, lots of moving pieces, lots of adjusting, and welcome back.
All right, Bridget?
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything as well, and just, a special shout out to those middle school teachers, staff, leaders who had to deal with some of the heat today, and Dr. Mueller's acknowledgement of that. And, there's days we just need to pivot, and I think they did a great job, and just really happy and lots of gratitude for our district.
All right, thanks. Barb?
Nothing new, just welcome back.
And Kevin?
I just want to say welcome back, everybody. I know for students it might feel slow at start, but we do have a 4-day weekend coming up. And then after that, we have early release. And then after that, we have homecoming. It's a lot to look forward to.
Yep, I just also want to say, it seems like overall it's a great start to the new school year. I enjoyed the new teacher orientation as well as the kickoff this year. And I guess outside of the heat in some of the buildings, I think everything else went very well today from what I know. Moving on to the board meeting schedule. On September 4th, we are starting our committees. Our board committees are starting back up. So we have a policy committee meeting that day at 5 p.m. On September 9th, we have a DEI committee meeting at 5 p.m., followed by a board meeting at 7 p.m. On September 23rd, we have September 23rd, we have a finance committee meeting at 5 p.m., followed by a board meeting at 7 p.m. We have a regular board meeting on October 14th at 7 p.m., and then on October 28th, we have a budget hearing at 6 p.m., followed by an annual meeting, followed by a regular board meeting. So is there any other business that needs to come before the board at this time? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.